I want to bring in NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, who's covering the White House. Peter Baker is the New York Times chief White House correspondent and an MSNBC political analyst. Michael Crowley is also with the Times and covers the State Department and U.S. foreign policy. So, Yamiche, what do we know about this call and what the president is wanting here?
Well, the big question is, how long is this call going to go? From our understanding, the call is underway. We haven't gotten any information from the White House that the call has ended. So this could be a very long call between these two leaders. Now, President Trump has really raised the stakes here. He said that nothing could happen when it came to these peace talks to try to end this war between Russia and Ukraine unless he and Vladimir Putin spoke directly. So that is now happening. We also have heard from White House officials and top Trump aides that the two at some point might be getting together in person. We know, of course, that the president is also planning to speak separately with the president of Ukraine as well as NATO leaders later on today. So also watching to see what happens there. Our understanding is that European leaders are pushing for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. We're not sure if President Putin is going to agree to that. President Trump is saying that he wants a complete end to what he's calling a bloodbath. The other thing that's interesting here is that even after we saw that disastrous Oval Office spray between President Trump and the president of Ukraine, where President Trump said that he was disrespectful and said that he didn't want to end the war, we've now seen President Trump sort of take a sharper tone actually against Russia, something that he hasn't done in the past, saying that he might have sanctions against them. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the president says after this call ends and sort of what is the next step here, because there's a lot riding on this. I should also note that the vice president is out just today in the last few hours in Italy saying that if the U.S. doesn't see enough progress, that they could walk away altogether. That, of course, would be really, really hard for Ukraine. So a lot riding on this call and definitely something that we're continuing to report on. Chris.
So, Michael, the president has been pushing for an end to this war for months. It hasn't happened, obviously. So why should we think that it will be different this time? What are the, I guess, circumstances surrounding it that might make it possible to happen?
Oh, I don't think we should think that it will be different this time fundamentally, substantively. You know, something I will be looking for is whether Vladimir Putin plays this in a clever way, which is to give Trump something in this call where Trump can walk away and say that he's gotten a concession and that they're making progress, but something that doesn't actually box Putin in. I mean, it's clear at this point that Putin thinks he has an upper hand and wants to continue the war. And does not want to do the kind of comprehensive deal that Trump is looking for. But at the same time, despite these increasing threats from the White House, just given everything we know about Trump going back for a decade now, it's very difficult to imagine Trump confronting Putin or escalating pressure against him. You really get a sense that Trump wants to be in Putin's good graces. So I think Trump, based on what we know, will be very eager to take anything from Putin, maybe some kind of a partial brief ceasefire like we saw the Russians agree to weeks ago, something very limited and partial, and say that he's making progress and essentially kick the can down the road. That would be one very likely scenario to me. The one last thing I would say here is I think the biggest question is that if Putin proves more intransigent than that and he doesn't give anything, you hear administration officials talk about walking away from this process. And the question is, does walking away mean just no longer trying to mediate a peace agreement, or does it mean walking away from everything, including support for Ukraine, which would be a de facto huge victory for Russia if America is not going to resume support for Ukraine? So that's the giant question looming in the background here.
Peter, I want to play part of what the Vice President, J.D. Vance, had to say about all of this just this morning.
Look, I think one open question is Vladimir Putin serious about negotiating peace, right? He has made some concessions. He has taken some serious steps in these conversations, but we feel like, you know, we're at a point where we're hitting an impasse, and that's why the president is talking to him on the phone. Yeah, I think, honestly, that President Putin, he doesn't quite know how to get out of the war.
So he doesn't know how to get out of the war, Peter, and also suggests he doesn't have a strategy. Do you think Putin is under any pressure? What is the pressure the White House thinks it has to bring to bear?
Well, I think actually very few people think that Putin is serious about ending the war at this point. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of that. He seems to think he has the upper hand. He has bragged that he is making progress on the battlefield, exaggerating what's actually happening there, of course. And as Michael just rightly pointed out, if the alternative to a peace deal that he doesn't want is the United States walks away from Ukraine. That is, as Michael said, a victory, because it means that they no longer have to worry about United States arms, and most importantly, they don't have to worry about United States intelligence, which has been crucial to helping the Ukrainians target and fend off Russian forces. So, Putin looks at this as a win-win, I think, at this point. Now, it's interesting to hear Trump and his people express frustration with Putin. That hasn't been something they've done a lot over the last 10 years. Trump is such an admirer of Putin over the years, called him a genius, called him very savvy, expressed so much admiration of him. Today, Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, said that the president is frustrated with both sides, meaning the Russians and the Ukrainians. From the Ukrainian point of view, if these talks are going to collapse, the important thing for them is to make sure that Putin gets the blame, or at least as much of the blame as they can muster, because they don't want Trump to back away, and they don't want Trump to say, to wipe his hands and say pox on both their houses.
You mentioned what Caroline Leavitt had to say, that he's frustrated, and I think she also said he is weary. What does history tell us about Donald Trump's stick-to-itiveness over the course of a long period of time with a difficult, sophisticated problem? If weariness is setting in, what does that mean for the long term, especially if you're President Zelensky?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you mentioned this. President Trump overestimated his ability to solve this war. He told people time and time again last year on the campaign trail that he would end the war within 24 hours, he said. In fact, it would be so easy, he would do it even before he was sworn in as president. Of course, that didn't happen. And his tolerance for long, drawn-out negotiations, which unfortunately are in fact, common in international relations, is pretty thin. And if he decides, this isn't working, I'm going to move on to something else, he tends to sort of shift his attention to whatever the next shiny bauble might be. He's feeling more confident right now about his negotiations with Iran to make a nuclear deal, and he might just, in fact, put his energies there and say, that's my big diplomatic victory of the year. That'll be what gets me a nuclear peace prize, and forget Ukraine. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does lose interest. That happens a lot with him.
Yeah, the Nobel is something we know that he would love to have. Michael, I want to play part of what Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, said yesterday about today's call.
The president has a force of personality that is unmatched. I think it's important. His sensibilities are that he's got to get on the phone with President Putin, and that is going to clear up some of the logjam and get us to the place that we need to get to.
So, Michael, roll call did a count. They say Trump claimed 53 different times on the campaign trail he could end the war in Ukraine in less than 24 hours. And a lot of it does seem to be based on that confidence. We just heard from Witkoff that the president has an unmatched force of personality. We know personal relationships do play an important role in diplomacy, but have they put too many eggs in that basket? What do we know really about the relationship between those two leaders?
Well, we know that publicly it's a relationship where Trump seems to be the suitor who flatters Vladimir Putin, who courts him and craves his respect. I mean, this goes all the way back to I was revisiting recently when Trump owned the Miss Universe beauty pageant and brought it to Moscow in 2015, I believe, maybe a year or two earlier than that. And he was tweeting at the time, I'm going to be going to Moscow with my beauty pageant. Do you think Vladimir Putin will meet with me? Do you think he will be my best friend? I mean, literally, he said, do you think he will be my best friend? That kind of set the tone for this relationship where Trump is the supplicant. Now, at the same time, it's shrouded in a certain amount of mystery. They have phone calls. We don't know all the details. There are times when the White House won't confirm or deny that there were conversations, or the Trump transition after the election. They weren't very clear about whether they were talking or not. So there's a level of mystery here. But ultimately, I would say two things. One, Trump's force of personality has failed before. Remember when he tried to get a nuclear deal with Kim Jong-un? His force of personality got Kim out to do some spectacular photo ops with the president and sort of normalize and legitimize his image. But they totally failed to make any progress on a real deal. And number two, Vladimir Putin has been president of Russia now for something like 25 years. He was a former KGB intelligence operative. This is not a guy who you're just going to kind of fast talk into something. So I'm just very skeptical of those claims.
Well, I had completely forgotten about the Miss Universe comments, and I think it's very telling and a reminder to all of us how consistent Donald Trump has been across many, many decades. Yamiche Alcindor, thank you. Peter Baker and Michael Crowley, you're staying with me.